All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're thrilled to have Alec Johnson, the force behind Take One Tech and the Digital Stage Academy. Alec has a groundbreaking technique called the One Take methodology, which has been empowering entrepreneurs for years to deliver authentic, high-impact content while overcoming perfectionism. Professor Alec, welcome to Dealcasters, my friend.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. It's a real honor to be here with you today.
The honor is ours, sir. And I meant it like, you know, when I said it earlier. I've spent many hours, as you know, the millions of other viewers have, watching your videos because there's something about them that is not only am I going to learn some new technique of how to use my Rodecaster or you know, how to use Zoom more effectively or some little tweak on Ecamm or on my Stream Deck. I start watching these things and I realize there's really not much editing that's going on, and I'm like, how in the world is this guy doing this thing? So I wanted to, as we introduce you to hopefully some new people here, I wanted you to just kind of talk about your journey and how perfectionism was a part of that, because I consider myself a recovering perfectionist as well, and how you developed this one take methodology to sort of overcome this perfectionism.
Yeah, it was really when I was trying to create a course completely separate and before Take One Tech. And I was an experienced public speaker, so I have no trouble standing on a stage in front of hundreds or thousands of people talking. That's no problem. But when it came to creating a video course, I found that I was always looking for that perfect take. And that was the perfectionist in me trying to get everything exactly as it should be. And what I found was that would mean that not only would I be taking lots of takes, but then when I took it into editing software to try to create the final masterpiece, it was far from a masterpiece because I wasn't actually a great editor either. And what I often found was there would be this thing where, you know, I'd do loads of takes, I'd get all the content together, and then I'd realize as I was trying to stitch it all together, I'm actually missing one critical bit. So I've got to now go back and film that other bit. And it was just embarrassing how long it would take me to create even a 10-minute recording for a course. And I figured, well, I've got no trouble speaking on the stage in front of people. I've got no trouble sitting down next to somebody at a desk to just talk them through something, a friend, a colleague, or whoever it is. You know, I'm a lot of people's go-to tech guy in my circle outside of this anyway. So I figured that I should just be able to do this in one take effectively and just do it as if I am talking to a friend or a colleague or a family member or whatever. And so that's when I started investigating this possibility of doing that. And then it turns out, actually, yeah, there's loads of pieces of software out there that can do exactly this. And I did start with OBS, Open Broadcast Software, which is a free platform. It's cross-platform on Mac and PC. I always say I pulled out my last hair with OBS. It didn't work the way my brain worked and led to endless amounts of frustration. And then I just happened to be watching Mac Break Weekly, which is a podcast that I love. I've been watching that for years, decades at this point, I suppose. And it just happened to see an episode with Doc Rock on it, and he was talking about Ecamm and obviously praising how great it was. This was before he was actually working with Ecamm directly, but he was just saying about how great it was. And so I thought, let me give that a look. And I've honestly never looked back from there. And so I set up the channel Take One Tech just merely as a vehicle to basically practice this process of making videos in one take with no edits, because Ecamm Live is live production software. It enables you to have yourself on screen, but then bring up a screen share of the content that you want to share on your screen, have multiple camera angles, obviously exactly all the things that you're doing here with this stream as well. And so as I got into practicing that process, that then led it down a whole rabbit hole of all of the tech gear associated with it, all of the possibilities it opens up, the fact that it's not actually just for recording videos or live streaming, but we can take that into Zoom, and so that can transform all of the other meetings and everything like that you can do with Ecamm. So, in a nutshell, that's been the seed of it, and the business has just sort of grown out from the channel, really.
It's really incredible when I think about it, because it's, you know, the way my squirrel brain works on this is you first said, okay, I don't love to do this editing. It took me forever. But then I hear you talking about this and my mind's going, well, doesn't that take forever? Doesn't it take forever to organize yourself in such a way that you have to set up all of the scenes on the Stream Deck and all of the scenes on Ecamm? And to someone who right now doesn't even understand Ecamm or OBS or all, StreamYard, whatever it is, and how to understand how to put together scenes. Right now, they're just like, hey, this sounds great. I don't have to do any editing, right? If I can do this all in one take and I can change scenes, but then once they get into the tech of this kind of stuff, you worked with people to simplify that aspect of it. So where are the stumbling blocks there when someone is trying to develop? Like, I would love to be able to, like, I do love editing, but I would love to do less cumbersome editing. Like, maybe I add some LUTs here, or maybe I add some transitions here that kind of make things, whatever. But like, what are some building blocks for someone who wants to put together this one take methodology to really just sort of start, instead of trying to boil the entire ocean? Where do they start to dip their toe in?
You've hit the nail on the head there, really. It's not actually trying to do it all from the beginning. I use lots of productivity tools, automation tools. So like Keyboard Maestro on the Mac is one that I use that can do all sorts of crazy automation things. Now, when I first discovered that tool about 18 years ago, I realized all that it could do. And so I decided that I was going to set aside some time to create the ultimate productivity system using Keyboard Maestro. And at the time, it was all reliant on keyboard shortcuts. So I spent probably the best part of 2 months planning out all of these different automations, all of these keyboard shortcuts, all of this amazing stuff that it could do. And then I came out of my man cave ready to start actually putting it into action. And what happened was I didn't actually have any muscle memory built up to know how to do any of it. And so all that time was effectively wasted, because there's no point trying to set up like the almighty system if you don't actually have the knowledge of how to use it. And so and not so much the knowledge, but as I say, the muscle memory. And that's the same with something like Ecamm Live. You can start with just having a couple of simple scenes. So yourself on screen, and then maybe a screen share, and then have, a Stream Deck button or use a keyboard shortcut to just switch back and forth between them. Maybe you want to integrate a presentation. So then you might have a, main camera, a screen share, and then also one that brings in Keynote or PowerPoint or something like that. And then you're only really trying to do really minimal things to begin with. And then you can start layering on things bit by bit as you've got a need for it. And as you start to realize that there's more that can be done. And so actually the barrier to entry with something like Ecamm Live is really quite low, because you can open it up. You don't need to have a really complex user interface. There's lots of windows in Ecamm, but technically you could have most of them shut to begin with. And so all you're seeing is basically just your camera. Maybe you want to add on like a lower third with your name, or a bit like you've got down at the bottom of the screen here with the title of the show, name tags like you've got on all of us as well. You can just add these things in bit by bit. And so, as I say, the barrier to entry is really quite low to it. And you can look at what people are doing and think, I don't know how I would begin to achieve that, but it's just a case of building up over time. I do have a free, not wanting to plug things, but I do have a free Ecamm Live masterclass. And actually, although that is 150 lessons or more, I did make just 13 quick start guides, and they're kind of like 15 minutes each. And you could literally just go through those, and then you'd be, up and running within a matter of a couple of hours or so. So I think that the barrier to entry is really low. It's just understanding what it gives you. And it's the ability to speak normally as you would to a friend or a colleague, and then just bring on the information on screen sort of seamlessly without having to go through all these sort of complicated things that you might need to do with either putting it in post, in editing, or if you're in a live Zoom call, for example. When people want to do this screen sharing in Zoom, there's that little dance that people go through where they say, okay, I'm sharing the screen, I'm looking for the right window, no, not that one, something else. And actually the impact of that, although I sort of make light of it, the impact of that is not to be underestimated, because it basically destroys the flow of the value that you're trying to deliver. and it's just a distraction. You want to be able to just seamlessly bring stuff up on screen as you're talking and then take it away when it's not relevant anymore. So that's what Ecamm and live production enable you to do. And as I say, there are other tools available, but for me, Ecamm is just the winner all the time.
It is massively incredible. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, and Alec, and Chris and I have talked about this, and you're a great example of it. Is like, even like what we're doing here, what people don't understand is you can take your like Alec's window, and he can use this in a Zoom using Ecamm as his virtual camera and do all this stuff. So now, to your point with the Zoom, you don't have to do hey, can I get permission to share my screen? And the host is like, oh yeah, how do I do that? And I just think that was such a powerful thing. And now the integration. And I just want to say, I want to thank you, and I appreciate that free course you put out. I've been going through it, because Ecamm has changed a lot, but you really kind of lay it out in a simplistic format to get people moving. And I think it's so important what you said, right? It's like people see these high-end productions being done on Ecamm and they feel like, oh, well, I want to do that. But, Chris and I have been doing this for a while, and there's still stuff we're learning. And you got to go step by step, because the other thing to remember is, right, the more complex you get, the more chances there are for, we'll just say, the gremlins to pop up. So I think that's something to be, to think about as well.
We're going to get right back to the show, but first I wanted to introduce you to the amazing Cloudlifter CL1 from Cloud Microphones. This amazing little blue box boosts your dynamic podcast mic signal for pristine audio quality in just seconds. Jim and I love ours, and you can snag one of these CL1s or new Cloudlifter X's for yourself from the links in the show notes below. Elevate your audio content with the Cloudlifter. Now, back to the show. Yeah, these courses, highly recommended. Go to Take One Tech on YouTube, even though it says takeonetech.io. That's, of course, Alec's main site. There's also Digital Stage Academy. We're going to get into that. But this YouTube channel, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not already subscribed to it, and why wouldn't you, just do it. It's amazing, the amount of content that you absolutely put out there for free. It helps people get up and running off the ground. Obviously, if you want to get more advanced, you may have to open your wallet a little bit and maybe buy Alec a coffee here and there. But that's the life of an entrepreneur. We do have some folks in the house, and I wanted to mention them. Jeremy is in the house, and he specifically just said hello to me, guys. So sorry, he doesn't like you. I'm kidding. Jeremy, welcome. And then Saeed is here. Thank you for joining us. And he's got a few fun things to say. Don't give people the time to check their phones and their emails, which is so important, right? You start pausing, you start looking, you start doing stuff, and all of a sudden they start to check out. Check their emails, and they're checking out, and you just miss them to that point. And here's my favorite comment that Saeed has. And that is, everybody's freaking out. CapCut is banned. And Alec's like, what's editing?
It's funny, actually. I do get people comment on my videos sometimes saying, like, the editing of this is really great. We don't see the edits. And I was like, do you think if I was editing, I would have left in all of the mistakes and the ums and ers? But there you go. Some people don't realize it's
isn't it about, like, not just, here's the other thing that I think about is that, we don't edit these conversations, and I still say, and this live video for me helped, sort of overcome. No, I don't want to say overcome, because it's helped me, become less of a perfectionist, I should say, because I was constantly repeating phrases. I was saying, Jim would get on my case because I always say whatnot. Now, whenever I say that, I have some trigger in my brain that electrocutes me. But I talk about authenticity, because I think that's something that people miss. And I'm not talking about showing up and doing a show that's not necessarily professional, and everybody's looking at up your nostrils, and you're spinning ceiling fans, and you're not wearing pants. And I'm not talking about that kind of authenticity. I'm talking about still being yourself, right? And I think a lot of times when people see these glorious videos that are edited, that are really just highly professional, and you're actually trying to be an entrepreneur and leading someone to help them with the problem, but there's also a cost involved. Not having that authenticity that trust, can sometimes go the wrong way if you have things that are just too polished and too edited.
Absolutely. I think people as well try to be authentic. I watch videos sometimes where I can see that people are trying to look authentic. And actually, all you need to do to be authentic is just be yourself. It's that
right.
simple. But I kind of feel that sometimes I watch videos and it's almost, cringeworthy when you feel like they're kind of forcing it to make it look like spontaneous or whatever it is. I don't know what the word is, but it doesn't actually come across that well that way either. But what you get with a one take thing is it's unpolished at all. There's no way that you can sort of sugarcoat things in the same way that you can if you were just be able to sort of edit things. And the same, by the way, goes for reading a script. So I never use scripts. I have sometimes bullet points if it's something that is a long video and I need to make sure that, like, for example, there's an Ecamm Live beta update out today. So I've got bullet points of things that I want to make sure I cover off. But apart from that, there's no sort of scripting involved. And so I think that that's something as well that I learned from when I was trying to do the edited videos myself and failing. I would have things scripted as well to try to make sure I hit everything. Yeah. And it just didn't sound like me, honestly. So the edited me scripted did not sound like the person that if you were sitting with me, how I would sound, which is basically this, making the odd mistake here and there. And I think that if you are trying to grow a business on YouTube by providing educational content that's, is going to help people with solving whatever problems they've got, with, a selfish view also that maybe some of those people may go on to buy some of your products or whatever, or services, it's actually really good to be able to just show that you genuinely do know your stuff inside and out because you're out there doing it without any edit. So there's no scripting involved. You're not sort of piecing things together. Same with the live streaming as well. People come on and ask questions there and I can either answer them or not know the answer. But that's the other thing is if I don't know the answer, I'll just say, hey, I don't know this. There's no shame in not knowing everything. That's right. So I think that's something that people get hung up on sometimes.
And it's worse to give the wrong answer. Right? I'd be honest as opposed to like, I hope what I'm saying is the right answer. And then, trying to pretend like you're an expert. And, especially nowadays that comes out, relatively quickly that you're wrong. And people are not afraid to let you know if you're wrong on YouTube, for sure. I'm glad you brought up YouTube, Alec. First off, I told you got to subscribe to Alec's YouTube channel. So go and do that right now if you haven't already. You don't already have done it. But secondly, your emails, sir, especially since you started, crafting them a lot more. I think the end of this last year into this new year, have been phenomenal, and I mean that. I think I've mentioned that to you. I replied to one of your emails, and yes, Alec does reply to his emails, ladies and gentlemen. And they're so well done, so chock full of value. And I think that's really hard for people to do. Like, everyone talks about building your email list, live off the rented land and that's how you do it. But it's not just that. It's not just, hey, everybody join my email list. It's like people need a reason to do it. They need some value. And I think you're doing a fantastic job. But you brought up YouTube, and in a recent YouTube email, you go pretty deep about how you should treat YouTube, not just as a place to maybe park your content, but you're talking about it's like one of the most powerful inbound marketing tools that people can actually use. Can you dig a little bit into that? Because I thought it was fascinating. In just one email, you went through like the 7 keys to actually using YouTube as an inbound marketing tool.
Yeah. The funny thing is, the course that I was building when I started practicing the one-take methodology with the channel was actually about social media marketing and Facebook advertising and so on. And that was, I won't go into the full details of that, but that was basically what the crux of the course was about. So it was all about paid advertising, effectively. And then there I was setting up this little free YouTube channel, not really planning to grow it into a business, and started building an audience. I did want to make sure, and one of those 7 keys that I talked about was, if you are starting a new business on YouTube or wanting to have it supplement, or not supplement, but rather support an existing business, then you do want to make sure that it's cost neutral from the start. I've seen people who are really heavily investing in YouTube from, like hiring professional editors and things like that when they haven't really got a large following. Now, if you've got the funds to to go through to do that, then fair enough. But for the majority of people, you want to see it as more of a, slightly longer game. And so try to make it as cost neutral as possible. And that's what I did when I set up the channel. I had basically a month when I registered the channel and then got everything ready to do my first live stream. And I set up things like buy me a coffee so that people could support the channel, but also so that people could book a call with me. Because if you're providing educational content, then there's a strong chance that people might want you to just talk them through it one-to-one. So people could book a call through buy me a coffee. And I set up a few other affiliate programs and things like that and started building out some digital products. But the funny thing was that this thing that started out as a hobby really started growing momentum pretty quickly. So by the time I was monetized technically on YouTube, I started it in May, whenever it was 4 years ago. And then by the end of the year, I'd reached that sort of monetization stage on YouTube. However, I had already made significantly more than I had made on YouTube, or just from those coaching calls and things like that. And so the irony is that setting up this thing to make a course about paid advertising, I haven't done any advertising for Take One Tech, and yet it's grown entirely organically, purely off the back of YouTube. And okay, I've done some, collaborations with people. I've spoken at some events and things like that. But essentially, it's still all been organic, and I haven't run any paid advertising as yet. So, or maybe I did a boosted post for an event once. I don't know, but generally, no paid advertising. So it is a tremendously powerful inbound marketing tool, because basically you're taking people on a huge part of the customer journey before you've even got to speak to them. People become aware of you through a paid ad, and then they've got to go through and do all their due diligence. They've got to go and click on your landing page, understand what it is you do. Maybe they want to have a call to establish if you can help them or not. And so they're going through this whole process of understanding and evaluation as a potential customer. Well, YouTube just sort of handles all of that part for you, really. And if you're putting out the content, it happens all the time. On 1 out of every 2 new people that I speak to on a coaching call, there's this moment where they just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, it just feels like I've known you for ages already because we've seen so many of your videos." And so people do get to, that know, like, and trust part. That's an essential part of people buying your products and services. That's sort of handled by YouTube, and depending on how much content you've put out, It's over 1,000 hours, and I know that there are some people who tell me they've watched every video. So you don't really get that exposure with just an ad or something like that. So it's tremendously powerful. But those 7 keys, though, are talking about just a couple more of them. The idea of making sure you can monetize from the beginning, making sure that you can, have some way for people to do that. So don't wait for 3 months and think, well, I'll get some content up there before I start, promoting a coaching call or whatever it is, a consultation. So that's like another important point there. The idea of collecting email addresses, if you've got a lead magnet, as we call them, so something that you can give for free in exchange for somebody's email, that is a really important thing to start building that email list. This is something that I didn't do properly from the beginning. I was probably slow to start to do it. And then when I did start collecting email addresses, I always felt slightly guilty because I wasn't really sending anything out apart from the initial download. And then it felt like, oh, I'm only ever contacting people when I've got something to promote, which just felt kind of icky as well. So that's why, it happens, busy with other priorities, but that's why towards the end of last year, I just started getting a lot more focus on providing value first content with, the occasional promotion sprinkled in there.
We'll get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about Social Media News Live. Jeff C. and his amazing guests will keep you up to date on what's happening in this entire changing world of social media. They talk with industry experts and innovators and creators about the latest social media news, tips, and tactics, and they broadcast live, so you can ask the questions that matter most to you and your business. Jim and I love this show, and we know that you will too. Head over to socialmedianewslive.com. Hey, tell them Dealcaster sent you. Now back to the show.
Wow.
Yeah, Jim, I know you were wanting to jump in about that.
Well, I think that's so important. And I think too, to your point about the whole use of your video, I mean, we actually got to meet in person in 2023, right? Because time flies, when you came out to Creator Camp, and I felt like I knew you because I've seen you on video. And I think that, and just like you said, you're the same in person as you are on camera. And I think that that kind of goes back to what you said, is people need to be authentic. But can you also talk a little bit, I think, and I'm not saying that the Ecamm fam is guilty of this, but I think sometimes people get really feeling like, oh, I got to spend all this money on gear in order to make good video and to really create good content. And I think you kind of help people walk along that journey.
Mm-hmm. I guess probably 2/3 of my videos were made in the first year of YouTube. I've not been as prolific as I used to. I did start out making a video a day for the first 100 days and then tried to extend that out to a year. I think I ended up making 300 and something in my first year, but not quite 365, but never mind. And so actually the past 2 years though, I've been really more focused on building out my academy content. And so there's been lots of course videos and stuff like that. So I digress. The point is that the majority of my videos were made in that first year. And actually for that first year, I was using a 10-year-old Canon EOS 60D, 10-year-old at the time, now 14 years old. And it had a USB-C, not USB-C, but a USB out that I could take into the computer. It was only giving me 720 into the computer. Ecamm was nicely upscaling it to 1080. But I didn't get people saying to me that, the videos looked bad quality. And it was a 10-year-old camera. I actually bought the camera at the time my daughter was born. I had the idea that my first daughter, that was going to be become this expert photographer. It never really happened. I'm not honestly a camera guy. Even now the cameras are sort of set up and behind my teleprompter and rarely touched. But that was the case. I just repurposed that old camera. The only thing that I actually bought to start creating content was a mic, not actually this one, but this one, the Shure MV7. This is the Rode pod mic USB. They're both pretty similar. But if Rode hadn't sent me this one for review, I would still be using this one. So they're both as good as each other. Audio, if you've got a good quality mic, the other thing about a microphone is it's going to last you, years and years. It's not something that requires upgrading. Like, there's always new cameras coming out with new features, higher resolution. There's always, new everything. But the one thing that there isn't is, there are new microphones come out, but it's still, going to last you a long time because they're not the sorts of things that break easily if you look after them, and they don't get sort of dated with new technology as much. So a good mic is the first thing that I invested in, and the other thing was the Stream Deck. And having just said that the mics don't need updating, actually, the Stream Deck is still the Stream Deck XL that I was using, back then. And you could almost take a time lapse of my entire studio setup, and it was a Stream Deck and that microphone, and everything else has sort of evolved around that. And even the camera I was using, these days the cameras that you've got on the a mobile phone is great. You could just be using that. So just get your audio right, and that's literally all you need to begin.
Yeah, there's so many analogies that I can think of. Like when you want to develop as a runner, right? You don't go out and buy $400 shoes, right? They're only going to last 300 miles anyway, right? You got to, and so as a creator, you've got to use the stuff that you got and develop that over time. On one of your emails, you talked about like a contest for people to like an author or whatever said there was a contest to develop the best pot, plant pot or whatever. And so like some of them, I'll let you explain it, but it was like, it was basically like, you have to go through the reps. You have to like you could take forever to develop this one thing, or you can develop a bunch of them. And which one was better? It's the one that you had to go through all the reps to create. And so, Jim and I, when we first started, we had Samson Q2U microphone and Audio Technica 2100. Those are still great mics. And if all of my mics were burned in a fire except for the Samson Q2U, I would be fine. It wouldn't stop me from creating content. If everything burned down except for a Logitech C920 webcam, that would be the camera that I would use. And and I wouldn't use maybe a teleprompter, and I would have like a plexi cam on my, just the basics. And so let's talk about those basics. I think one of the basics people forget about is eye contact and placement on a show. I was, I was mostly stoked, Alec, when you joined our show backstage at Ecamm, and it was like I had to adjust my cameras back to normal because you know how to place yourself on camera as opposed to other people who are coming in, like this, and they're down here, and they're, and so you have to move around them. Maybe talk to some folks before they start spending $400 on a microphone and $1,000 on a camera and a lens. How they can work with what they've got in order to present themselves well on this digital stage.
Yeah, positioning, you're absolutely right, is a huge thing. There is a thing called the rule of thirds. I've got a nice little template that fits over my face here. So if you imagine like this line a third of the way down, that's where you want your eyes to be, basically. Now, how sort of zoomed in you are within that is, you can vary that by all means. And if you wanted to shot like where you're off to the side, then if you sort of typically have it, on this third line here as well. But what I see all the time is people who are basically putting their eyes, I can't even do it, in the center. Mm-hmm. And it always looks to me like somebody's just sort of peering up over the bottom of the desk.
It does.
So it just doesn't look professional at all. So that's the basic thing of positioning. And even if you've got like a laptop, you're using a built-in camera. I mean, the built-in laptop cameras these days are getting better and better. Making sure that you've got it at eye level. Put it on a stand or a pile of books or whatever you need to do, just so that you've got it at that eye level, and then also position yourself with your eyes at that third of the way up is going to make a world of difference. And the other thing I should say, as well, is with lighting. Even the worst camera can be dramatically improved by some good lighting. I mean, I've got sort of more professional looking soft boxes these days, but actually the first ones I got were some, they weren't from Amazon, but something similar, just some cheap soft boxes. They had variable temperature lighting, as in from yellow to the more sort of daylight, but that was only achieved by changing light bulbs for daylight or warm light. So they were that sort of level, just using regular light bulbs. But that made a huge difference to the image quality just by having that better quality lighting. So there's certainly things you can do just as a basic that are going to improve the way things look for you.
We're going to get right back to the show, but first I've got to share this genius tool with you. It's called the PlexiCam. You can say goodbye to awkward eye contact struggles on your live streams, your presentations, Zoom calls. This PlexiCam lets you maintain eye contact effortlessly by simply attaching to your monitor. It's compatible with webcams, phone, DSLRs, you name it. It's like having a personal eye contact assistant. Jim and I both love ours. So level up your eye contact today. Check out the links below. Now back to the show. We're going to get right back to the show, but first I wanted to tell you about the game changer for your audio setup. Of course, it's the one and only Shure SM7B microphone. This iconic beauty is a go-to for top-notch podcasts. You've seen it on stream. It's the perfect microphone for any environment. You don't need a fancy studio. It's got built-in protection that handles background noise like a pro. Jim and I love ours, and you can level up your audio game today. Just check out the show notes for the links. Now back to the show.
I would add too, like you mentioned the laptop and getting it, getting it on a pile of books or whatever. The one thing that I always add with people, and I remote produce shows every day throughout the week. It's what I do, and most times when somebody's joining a show, that's what they're doing. They've got a laptop, and so I try to get them. But the other thing that I try to get them to not do as much is to pound their table or to move their desk, because what happens is that laptop screen is on in like a whatever spring or whatever is engineered in there, and so when it's doing that, guess what? So are you. You're doing, and it's like that can be just it can drive people nuts. But I love how one of the first things you talked about when we talked about people starting where they're at, you talked about audio. And you didn't say, you basically said this is a pod mic, USB mic, and I had the Shure MV7. None of these microphones are going to completely break the bank. They're getting, not only are they getting better, they're getting more affordable, and they work, just by plugging into a computer. Now just plugging into a phone, so you can get this like really great high end sounding microphone that you can plug into a phone, and there's really, there's almost no excuse, really. It used to be people would get, I don't have the budget, or I don't understand. I'm not a tech person, which I have a whole, that's a thing that drives me up a wall. It's like, no, you're just not taking the time to understand how this stuff works. You're not subscribed to Take One Tech on YouTube, where they can tell you how to use a Stream Deck and even in the most basic way to turn on certain things. And so I think you got to put in the work. So speaking of put in the work, Alec, we've got your fan club is here. And so we got to say hey to Rich Graham. Kilroy is peeping up. So apparently that was your lower third peep that he had to. I'm gonna probably butcher this name. Alizi Paradise, maybe, is that how we say that? Hello, everyone. Hello, thank you for joining. On Amazon, and we have Saeed and Jeremy Hubble just busting each other's chops here in the chat. We don't need to see that. No, I'm kidding. Speaking of busting chops, Dr. Hicks is in the house. He says next time I say whatnot, he's gonna hit me with an electric shock. I appreciate it, James. Thanks for joining us. Saeed says, I sometimes see video podcasts where they edit out every pause and filler word. At the end, they look like they recorded in 12 FPS, so many jumps and cuts. Mm-hmm. It's true. It's like when Descript came out with this remove filler word thing, and it works on video, I was like, great, because I say a lot of filler words. Let me just get those things out, right? And what happens is, if I said, and then I moved a little bit, all of a sudden it's like, it's going crazy. So I think you just got to do it all in one take, Alec. Then you don't have to worry about it, right? You don't have to worry about these edits. Jeez.
Well, awesome. And I think that's a great point, Chris. It's like by being live, right? You're natural. I love what Alec brought up earlier, because I know I've been, recording some different videos where I was trying to use a script and it just wasn't me, right? So it's like, okay, what are the main points? I'm going to say it, and you can tell, right? It's just more natural. It's the same way we're talking right now. None of us has a script. We're just kind of going along with a conversation. And I just think that that's where a lot of these people, if you're getting started, right? Just be yourself. Just be natural. Don't worry about the ums, the ahs, the whatnots, whatever word I say. I don't know. Chris hasn't necessarily told me what I say over and over, but those are the sort of things that people are more likely to connect with you, I think, because like, you know what? They're a real person and they're not trying to be this perfect thing. I mean, I don't know. Let me ask both of you. If you give a talk, do you sit there and actually write it out word for word and then try to memorize it? I don't do that anymore. I always kind of joke like, yeah, I have no idea what I'm going to say when I get up there, right? It's just going to come out.
I'm the same. It's bullet points, essentially. Now, what you find, though, if you are doing the same thing over and over again, is you'll find that there are certain things that you sort of repeat over and over again. And so you almost build up a subconscious sort of script about certain things. Anyway, I'm sure there's certain things I've talked about, like earlier on when we were talking about the why I created the channel and the journey and so on. This is something that I've talked about so many times now, that there are certain things that have subconsciously almost become second nature. It's not to say that I'm sticking to a script, but it's they've become embedded almost in the way that I talk about things. So certain things you find that if you're, as I say, talking about things often, they will just naturally recur, I suppose, in that way. But I don't use a script.
My podcast coach, Dave Jackson, says, write like you talk like you write. And so it's like, and I think that's part of being authentic, right? Especially now in AI. And I want to touch a little bit on AI, Alec, because I'm curious how you utilize it. But there's so much, with AI right now that I don't have to hammer out show notes, or I don't have to worry about questions that I need to ask Alec Johnson when he's on our show, and like all of these things that you might be tempted to just kind of say, well, this is a nice little easy button, and let's just take what's given here. And I think it's a good framework in a lot of ways for you to kind of go, I didn't think to maybe ask Alec this question, but I'm going to ask it as if I'm asking it, right? Mm-hmm. It's not, I'm not going to, speak emojis. I'm not going to speak, about delving, because I never delved in anything, nor do I ever say that. So, how do you, utilize AI in this? Because so much of what you do is the one take, is the authentic part. Are you utilizing more for processes and organizing yourself, or how do you utilize it? Maybe some programs you use specifically would be great.
It's almost exclusively ChatGPT.
Okay.
I recently cancelled my subscriptions to Claude and Gemini because although I signed up to them, I just wasn't using them. I found that the thing about ChatGPT that is really its superpower, and to be fair, it's the superpower of the others as well, but I've just got to pick a lane basically, is the fact that it has this longer term memory now of us. Actually, the head of AI at Microsoft said that we're likely in this year at some point going to get to all intents and purposes, infinite memory for our conversations with ChatGPT. It's the thing that is I constantly run up against, is where it's got this. If you're running it on the mobile or on your desktop, then you can go. Well, you can do it on the web actually, but you can go in and say, right, I want to selectively remove things from the memory, and it does get full up. I'm not talking about in an individual chat thread, but just generally the things that it remembers about you cross threads as well from one chat to another. And I'm finding that I have to go back and go down to the bottom and think which bits of these are not necessarily relevant, to me anymore. But that is going to be really a game changer. And I use the voice. I'm on the verge of basically upgrading from the $20 a month to the $200 a month, because although I'm not doing the complicated maths computations that it says that's ideal for, what it does give you is just continuous use of the voice feature to be able to speak in the advanced voice mode. Now, one of the things that people don't necessarily know about me, because they think, oh, Alec's always putting out content and he's prolific and he's whatever, these things that people say to me. The fact is, I struggle tremendously with procrastination, with all kinds of other things. And if you look at things that I've put out, I can guarantee you that many of them were either later than I was expecting. Many things that I have not put out that I had intended to put out, I've fallen short of targets that I've set for myself regularly. And the biggest game changer for me that I found with ChatGPT is actually helping me organize my thoughts, organizing my schedule, and focusing me on what's the thing that I need to be doing next. And I often am very good at these sort of big picture ideas, thinking that, I need to launch this, or I'm going to launch that. But actually, okay, let's dial it down. What are the steps that I need to take between now and then so that I'm hitting those deadlines? And that's something else that I started doing probably in, I want to say June last year. And that's what's actually had the biggest impact, because it's been able to, it's allowed me to be more focused on things that I need to focus on and not be distracted about the things that I love, but that are not actually adding a huge amount of value, or maybe not driving me in the right direction. So I will sit and talk to ChatGPT daily for an extended period, all the time, like through the day, about things that need to get done. In terms of writing and content creation, my problem in my writing, as in my videos, is talking too much and waffling. And so what I find is that I'll do the first draft, and then I'll give that to ChatGPT to let's just dial that down a bit. So that's where I'm using
edit for clarity, so to speak.
Yeah. And so things like the newsletters, the way that I create those is I have a long conversation and I talk through things. It then creates an edited down version, and then I go through that one, and then I add myself into that. So that's the sort of process. Yeah.
That is fascinating. I didn't really, and because you're speaking into it, it has your voice. It quite literally your voice, and it's utilizing that and editing for clarity, and then like throwing in 14 rocket emojis, probably, right?
Yeah, I try and remove those where possible, but occasionally I'll leave them in for emphasis. Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. All right, so we've got quite an active chat. And so I think when we were talking about a lot of the stuff earlier, Jeremy says it's kind of like reminding people to like, subscribe, and comment below, links below. After a while, it becomes not only second nature, but you learn to read the room to determine if you should say it. Yeah, I mean, how many times have I recorded a video and then I would forget to say Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, and, do this, that, or the other. Let us know in the comments. Or like if I'm doing a product video, the disclaimer that we're supposed to say where this, such and such, sent us this, but these opinions are all our own. Like those are the things like you get in trouble with, the FTC for not saying that disclaimer. Like those are all things if I were better organized, I could easily do that in one take. But Jeremy, we appreciate that. And this is an interesting comment from Saeed. Watching your own recordings is powerful. This is something that I do a lot, but I have to get away from it because sometimes it can be deconstructive for me. But because as long as I'm looking at it and trying to improve myself. But Saeed says watching your own recordings is powerful. Cringeworthy at first. I totally agree. But you'll improve fast. Watch like you're in your own audience. I mean, have you done that, Alec? Is that part of your process?
Yeah.
Or
it's not part of my process as such, but I have watched my own videos for that purpose. To obviously not for entertainment, but I've watched them back to see. And I haven't really done this for too long, really, but going back and watching them, the thing about them being one take with no edits is it means that they don't by default have timestamps in them. And I've got out of the habit of doing this, but I used to go back and basically watch them at double speed to figure out where to put the timestamps. So I would see I would watch them by definition doing that, but I've got out of the habit of putting timestamps, unfortunately, so I need to get back to that. That thing though about watching other people as well and watching yourself. The barrier that there is with this idea of perfectionism, and one of the barriers for people putting stuff out is this sort of fear of failure or fear of what people are going to think when you put yourself out there on video and for potentially the whole world to see. Guess what? The whole world isn't watching, but still, we have that thought that like, if I go, I mean, my first video on YouTube was also my first live stream on YouTube, and I hit the go live button with 0 subscribers, and guess what? 0 people were watching as well. So yeah, it's there we go, which was a kind of odd experience, just sort of streaming to myself. But anyway, the thing though is we are really super hypercritical of ourselves. I'll speak for myself. I am, and I think people in general tend to be more critical of themselves than other people. And this fear of failure that people have, if you think about what it actually is, what is the fear around failure? It's a fear of what other people will think of you. It's a fear of embarrassment potentially that might be caused by falling flat on your face or whatever the case may be. It's that fear of what people are actually going to think. But in actual fact, if you look at the content that you watch and notice how you react when you see somebody make a mistake or it's not quite right or it's not quite perfect, and think about like your favorite YouTubers that you watched for informative content, you'll probably notice that they're also not perfect if you really focus on it. But does it actually impact your view of them? And so if we take that sort of more compassionate view of ourselves, just as we do with other people, you'll realize that, yeah, actually, that's the way that most people are looking at you too. They're not looking there being hypercritical over everything. This was really brought home to me recently when I watched a course, and the person making the course, I don't know whether they had intended to edit the course afterwards, but their videos, frequently in the video, the person would say, and then let's say it was a tutorial. They were talking about clicking on buttons or whatever. They'd say, and then we go up to this button here and we click on this button. And then they sort of stopped and paused and went, and then we go up and click on. They repeated it like as if they meant to cut it out, but there was no editing in the video whatsoever. And it was done like that with literal retakes all through the video. Oh, and I just was really noticed that I didn't care. It didn't bother me at all. I didn't think, oh, this guy doesn't know his stuff, because he was still saying the same thing. He was just obviously conscious about how he was being on camera and maybe intended to edit it and forgot. I don't know. But whatever the case is, I did not feel any less about him or his skill or his ability to teach the stuff that he was doing. It just seemed to me like an editing issue. So that's really the point there. Is it's easy to be hard on ourselves when we wouldn't be on others, and just know that others aren't going to be as hard on you as you think they are.
That's fantastic advice. I love that. I think, somebody said something like, if you think about how little other people think about you, then you'll think about all of that stuff less, you know, and it's so true. You know, if you ever think about years ago when you do something incredibly embarrassing, you know, like Jeff C tells this story about how he spilled ice water in his lap right before he went live with a really major guest. And, you know, like, and he tells that story now, or like something that you consider really embarrassing. No one remembers it but you, right? It's like, and if you've learned from it, whatever mistake you made, and you've learned from it, then just keep going, you know? And I think lots of times when people let that stuff pile up, it keeps them from creating, and they get stuck. So I'm really glad that's fantastic advice. So we have something here from Think Legal that's specifically for you, Professor Alec. You mentioned doing a training on Notion, and it got me curious. So I've signed up for Notion and started using it. I would love to have Alec's masterclass / class or something on Notion. This is a request from Think Legal.
A lot of people have requested it since I've been talking about Notion, actually. I will do something on Notion at some point, as in a course. And then there'll be something in the academy as well with that as well, like workshops and stuff. But yeah, I don't have a firm date for that, but there's definitely going to be something coming. I highly recommend, though, anybody interested in Notion, go and check out Kat Mulvihill's channel, and also some of the things she's talking about related to Notion and productivity beyond just the system itself. So I think when I started the Take One Tech channel, bearing in mind that it was just intended as a way for me to practice the process of making tutorial style videos rather than it being focused on, you know, the tech that I used to do it, which is it's got a bit meta in the meantime. But I did actually consider making a productivity channel. That was I was going to focus on to practice this process, where I talk about my, you know, productivity system. The reason why I didn't do that, and I'm always a little bit cautious, is because actually everybody's minds work differently. And so it's very easy for somebody to say, oh, I'm just going to go to, grab a template from somebody, which is their entire system that they run their life by, and they seem to be doing very well with it. So let me just take that and I'll just plug into that. The fact is that we're all wired very differently, and what works for one person doesn't work for another. And so I will make a Notion system, a Notion course at some point, but it'll be more about the sort of ideas behind how you can use it and stitch it together to make something that works for you. In the meantime, go and check out Thomas Frank. He's another great Notion guy and has got loads of free templates for Notion as well. But yeah, just be conscious of getting the all singing, all dancing system and template, but then figuring that there's a load of friction involved in using it, just as me when I created my own ultimate system, but didn't have the muscle memory to use it. It's a case of learning the building blocks rather than just being handed a template. But that's what my course would ultimately do, is give people the structure to build something themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of courses, every time a new great piece of gear comes out, especially from Rode, like the Rodecaster Pro 2 or the video unit that they just came out with, or anything related to something like that, I kind of wait for my man Alec here to put out a video, because I know he probably signed an NDA and he probably has videos just ready to hit go live from YouTube, and that's because I trust that what you're going to deliver is going to be, for me, and I'm going to understand, okay, well, this is like a fairly expensive piece of gear. Is it something that I just am going to snap my fingers and it's going to show up here on my desk and it's going to make me a better, remote producer? Or do I really need it? If I've got some other interface or whatever. And your level of detail, sir, on these videos is amazing. And then you'll put out, different, like one will be just specifically for, the program pads, and other will be, going through all the processing and all of those kinds of things. Just outstanding videos. I'm curious. This is just kind of like a, maybe off the cuff, because I know there are a number of creators here that look at that and they go, oh my God, like how much patience were you once like an actual professor, like a teacher at university or something?
No, actually. No, not at all.
Wow.
I just get asked a lot of questions. I've always been a total tech geek, and so I've always found myself explaining things to people, and I guess that's where it comes from. But
I mean, how do you carve out the time and the discipline? It just seems to me like, Jim and I get sent products all the time, and and a lot of them, some of them are, before it actually comes out, we go through that whole process of NDA, and so you kind of put it through its paces, and it's not a short amount of time, because when you are putting out something, you want that trust, you want to be able to speak authentically about whatever that thing is. So you want to just kind of beat it up and, test out and stuff. And something as complicated as a Rodecaster or the Videocaster or Stream Deck, they're incredibly, how do you carve out that time and discipline? Is that easier for you because you've gone through the reps on these things? Or is it what's your process there, I guess?
I've always been someone who, whenever I get something, I will just press all the buttons. From being a kid, seeing a new car, I'll just go and press all the buttons. Or the new VCR arrives, I'll be, pressing everything to figure out what it does. And I just go through systematically and figure it out. I can't say it any other way than that. That's basically what I do. And when people are trying to learn a new piece of software, for example, often what happens is they open it up and they think, this looks tremendously complex. I don't know where to begin. Therefore, I won't begin. Yeah. Right. Whereas you can actually learn an awful lot just by clicking on the application, going up to the menu bar, going through the edit menu. What do all those things say? What do those potentially do then? It's for a piece of software, that is kind of what I do. I just go through every single menu item. Then I will refer to the instructions. But I always want to get a perspective of like how things work just out of the box. That was the same with the Rodecaster video relatively recently. I did get an early release of it, and I got it about a month before the official public release of it. But I didn't take it out of the box until the day before the release. And I only spent that day with it, just going through with it. And then the next day, the embargo was lifted at basically 10 p.m. my time. So I spent one day just going through it and pressing all the buttons. And the next day, I actually spent creating keynote slides to illustrate the points. So that was the time involved. But I think that it's important to actually, especially for new things, to give that sort of first perspective where you haven't just sort of spent like months getting used to it. Because there were a lot of people who said the Rodecaster videos are complicated. And I think unlike other pieces of tech, you're going to need, a good month to get used to it. Well, in actual fact, I've found that it was pretty intuitive out of the box, and I didn't need to refer to any of the documentation to get going with it. There were certain things in the documentation that I was like, oh, I didn't realize that. So, definitely do that part as well. But still, that's the sort of the time that I sort of spend with these things. And often with software, like with all my Stream Deck videos, one of the things that works in my favor is the time zone. So I'm in Thailand, and I often found with Stream Deck, by the way, I haven't released a Stream Deck video for quite some time, but I used to always be like one of the first out with when there was a new release of the Stream Deck software. And what would happen is, normally, I used to record my videos for YouTube at sort of between 4 and 6 in the morning, and that was my YouTube time. But if a release dropped for the Stream Deck that was in the evening, then I'd also go down and just make a video at like 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. and I'd get the video done, post it, and then when everyone else woke up the next morning in the US, then it was just sort of there waiting for them. But that was literally go through the release notes, go and try pressing all the buttons and figure it out. And so that there's not much more to my process than that, really.
Wow. So when you do that, how do you ensure that it's targeting your ideal audience, right? So, and things change, right? New firmware for Rodecaster Pro 2, or things like that. You say you're not doing the new updates for Stream Deck as often as you want. You become like the new Ecamm Beta when that came out. That was the first thing in my head. I was like, oh, hey, we're interviewing Alec tonight. He's gonna be able to tell us all about it. And the truth is, it's like you're working on it, right? But it's like, you kind of don't, and you're just I guess you're just gonna go through and push all the buttons, and But for me, when I see you do that video, it doesn't seem like that. It seems like you've planned so much to go into it. It's crazy.
So I'm not necessarily pressing the buttons for the first time in the video. I am pressing them at least once or twice before.
Okay.
I will go through it. It's not quite that fresh, but like with the Ecamm Live beta, for example, that would be a case of, I know what's in there. I know what they can do, and I understand, as you say, how it relates to my audience. And I do try and, with the Ecamm stuff, it's a bit different. I try and give a broader scope of stuff that maybe even I'm not doing. But actually, most of the updates for that apply to me. But I'm also very conscious of, when I do talk about things, that I do specify that, this is how it relates to me and this is how I'm using it. Even just things like the Stream Deck, I'm obviously a Mac guy, so I don't cover, plugins that are PC only, for example. And so it's just being aware of that much. And I will say that, I'm using Stream Deck for productivity and live streaming, whereas other people might be using it for something different. So being conscious of who the, your core audience is important. So you sort of frame things as it relates to that.
Outstanding. Ladies and gentlemen, take1tech.io is the website. Make sure you go and subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is at Take1Tech. Alec, the Digital Stage Academy is another thing that you can find by going to take1tech.io/academy. And I this just an outstanding amount of value that I've gotten. Jim has mentioned, hey, did you see this new video that Alec Johnson did on this, that, and the other? You're just, you're super impactful to content creators. Thank you so much for the outstanding work that you've done. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing your audience with us. It's just been outstanding, and I'm glad we record these things, because now I got to go back and timestamp all these things and be like, okay, I didn't have to write down this note that Alex said because I need to be doing this, that, and the other. And I just appreciate you as a content creator, and just the amount of value that you continue to provide and serve to creators in general is just outstanding, man.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alex.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. And I think so highly of you. I was just saying to Chris before we went live. Honestly, your repurposed content is something that is only in my dreams, because I just never get around to doing any of the repurposing, and it always just looks so on point. It's amazing.
Well, if I can figure out how to CapCut.
No. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I think I appreciate that, man. I think if we can figure out how to repurpose content in one take, that's impossible. But I appreciate that, and we'll be, there's plenty of nuggets from this episode that we're gonna repurpose for all the people as well. So thank you, Saeed. Thank you, George. Thank you, James. Think Legal. There's a huge list. Rich Graham, Jeremy, Alizi. We'll even
Dr.
thank James Hicks. We'll even thank James Hicks. No, we got to bust his chops. Alec, thank you once again, and as always, don't fear the gear.
Thanks for listening to Dealcasters. Congratulations, you've taken another step forward in your content creation journey. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe or follow button here in your favorite podcast player, so you can be reminded every time we drop an episode.
We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. And if you're wanting to watch our shows live on Amazon, feel free to follow Dealcasters Live as well at dealcasters.live.
Follow us on Twitter or subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we also included added content that you cannot find anywhere else.
If you have questions about this episode or have something you want us to review, you can also email us at dealcasters@dealcasters.live. Thanks again for listening, and you know the deal. Don't fear the gear.